This Saturday is UFC Vegas 87, Jairzinho Rozenstruik versus Shamil Gaziev, and this is going to be my full card predictions. I'm going to go through every single fight on the card and give you a quick breakdown and prediction. This was at one point in time UFC Fight Night Saudi Arabia that got postponed till June, and now we have another Apex card. It's okay. It's not the greatest card at all, and it comes on this afternoon on Saturday, so make sure you keep that in mind. Starting off with the first fight of the night, we have Christian Leroy Duncan versus Claudio Ribeiro. Christian Leroy Duncan, I was really high on him at one point, but then he lost to Armen Petrosian pretty handedly, and he was just trying to be too flashy in that fight, and it kind of turned me off. Then you have Claudio Ribeiro coming off a KO loss to Mokaev where he got absolutely brutalized with a head kick. But in this matchup, I have to go Christian Leroy Duncan. I think Christian Leroy Duncan, while he doesn't throw like a lot of combinations, he has decent footwork. I think he's the more technical striker than Claudio Ribeiro. Claudio Ribeiro kind of has the striking of like a Family Dollar version of prime Yoel Romero, where he kind of plots forward, throws big shots, doesn't really mix in the grappling that much. He doesn't even have the grappling, level of a Yoel Romero in his prime, but that's what he kind of reminds me of, honestly. He has big power, but outside of that, it's not like he's a particularly amazing striker. His only win in his UFC career is against Joseph Holmes, which is like bottom of the barrel MMA, where you have Christian Leroy Duncan coming off that win over Dennis Tululin, where landed some nasty elbows in the clinch. First round was garbage, though. They spent the whole first round in the clinch. And then the loss to Armen Petrosian, then his UFC debut, he won against Dusko Todorovic, and there was kind of like a freak injury, but he looked decent while the fight lasted. I just think Ribeiro isn't going to mix in the grappling. And I think Leroy Duncan's the better striker. I think he's more tactical. I think he's faster. I think he's going to be elusive in this fight. I do think the smaller cage favors Ribeiro, but I think Christian Leroy gets it done. Ribeiro's coming off a brutal KO loss against Mokaev. I think he gets finished again against Christian Leroy Duncan. Christian Leroy Duncan doesn't have like crazy power, but he has decent enough power where if he puts a couple shots on you, he can get the finish. I don't trust either guy's cardio, to be quite honest, but Leroy Duncan did go 3 rounds against Armen Petrosian, so there is that. I think Ribeiro, if he gets too active, he'll gas out completely. So I'm going to go Christian Leroy Duncan, like late second round TKO. I see Ribeiro kind of gassing out, throwing big shots, and getting clipped up by Christian Leroy Duncan and getting finished via TKO in the second round. Moving up on the card, we have Loik Radzhabov versus Abdul Karim Al-Selwady. This is an interesting matchup. Honestly, I feel like this fight could go either way. Al-Selwady beat George Hardwick on Dana White's Contender Series, looked decent there, got a decision win, but wasn't like crazy impressive. I believe, everyone expected George Hardwick to win that fight. I believe he was like a UK prospect or something, but he looked decent. And then you have Loik Radzhabov, who kind of wants to grapple, throws like wild power shots. He's coming off a loss against Mateusz Rebecki, which he got brutally KO'd in, but that's 7 months ago. And then before that, a win over Esteban Ribovics. Before that, a win in Eagle FC, and before that, a loss in PFL against Rush Manfio. 33 years old. I think Abdul Karim Al-Selwady, I'm butchering his name right now. I think decent footwork. He's fast. He's well-rounded. He's not really great anywhere, but I think Loik Radzhabov probably has the size advantage. It's hard to tell until you see him side by side, but when I was watching back different fights, I thought Radzhabov looked much bigger than Selwady. But I think Selwady's better. I don't trust Radzhabov's cardio. I think, he starts to slow down in the third round as the fight goes on. I remember him slowing down against Ribovics, I think it was. And he just comes forward and throws these crazy, power hooks, and that's basically what he has to do. And he has to mix in the grappling to win the fight. I think Selwady has decent enough takedown defense and offensive grappling himself. I think he'll be able to get it done. So I'm going to go Abdul Karim Al-Selwady decision. I'm going to say 29-28. I'm going to say he loses the first round. Maybe he gets taken down by Radzhabov. Maybe, Radzhabov lands a couple big shots and just kind of squeaks out the first round. But then Selwady starts to put it on him in the second and third round and wins the fight via 29-28 decision. Moving up on the card, we have Javid Basharat versus Aiemann Zahabi. Javid Basharat is coming off that no decision against Victor Henry for the accidental groin kick. Victor Henry's nuts was a total lie. I honestly don't believe it hit him in the nuts. I know people are going to probably comment down below, Joe, you don't know what you're talking about. I watched it so many times. Unless somehow it grazed the cup and pinched him, there was nothing. There was no, his delayed reaction, the way he fell down cartoonishly. I don't know what it was, but he just looked for a way out. And I just think, there was no evidence. There was no evidence to support it. There was no injury. I think it was all horseshit. I don't trust it at all. Watching the replay, it doesn't really look like it landed. And if it did, it just barely grazed it. For that type of reaction in a fight that he was losing, just kind of rubs me the wrong way. I wanted to put it out there in this video. But I think Javid Basharat's super well-rounded. He's kind of a bit of a decision machine. Honestly, I think all his UFC wins are via decision. But he's super well-rounded. Good grappling, good striking. He's getting better with every single fight. And you have Aiemann Zahabi, who coming off a KO over Richie Lang. Before that, a decision win over Ricky Turcios. And before that, a win over Draco Rodriguez. He has decent power, but not super active, honestly. Also, I mean, to go back 5 fights, you're going 6.5 years ago almost, or 6 years, 3 months, according to Topology. Not super active and kind of a one-trick pony. He has decent takedown defense, has decent grappling, but it's not that great. It's mainly he's just striking in his power. That's really, and he kind of hunches over, and he's not like some super, what's the word I'm looking for? He doesn't use a lot of footwork to set up his striking. He just hopes to kind of land a bomb, and he doesn't even have like crazy power. So I think, Zahabi's just too stiff on the feet. I see Javid Basharat outstriking him, mixing in the grappling. I think Basharat will get stuffed early. I think Zahabi will be able to stuff him early, but I don't think Zahabi will be able to put anything of note in the striking together and land. And I see as the fight goes on, I could see Javid Basharat being able to get the takedown, controlling him a little bit on the ground, maybe even finding a submission. But I just think Javid Basharat's better everywhere, but I don't know if he finds a finish because Aiemann Zahabi, he's not a guy that particularly gets finished a lot. He only has 2 losses in his pro MMA career. And I believe, he only got finished once, and that was over 6 years ago. So I'm going Javid Basharat. I'm going to say 30-27 decision. If he does win, it'll probably be via submission. Moving up the card, we have Eryk Anders versus Jamie Pickett. This is an easy pick for me. I'm going Eryk Anders. I think Eryk Anders gets it done via finish, to be quite honest. Eryk Anders is coming off a loss against Marc-Andre Barriault. Was looking good early. Good elbows in the clinch. Good wrestling ability against Marc-Andre Barriault. But kind of just, he got fouled a lot in the second round, lost that round, and then couldn't really recover in the third round. Before that, coming off a win over Kyle Dawkins via KO, and then losses to Jung Young Park and Andre Muniz. Not horrible losses to have. Meanwhile, you got Jamie Pickett. Lost to Josh Frem, where he got out-grappled in that fight. Lost to Bo Nickel, got submitted there. Lost to Dennis Tululin, got finished there. Lost to Kyle Dawkins, got finished there. So literally every fight except Josh Frem, he got finished. He's 35 years old. He's just bottom of the barrel. I think Eryk Anders beats him any way he wants to beat him. I think he's the better striker. I think he has more power. And I think even if Jamie Pickett's probably strength is his striking, but it's so mediocre. I think even if Jamie Pickett starts to get off on the feet, Eryk Anders will clinch up with him, beat him up in the clinch, use some of those standing elbows, mix in the takedowns. I think he'll be able to take down Jamie Pickett with ease. I don't think he'll need to knee him in the groin like Bo Nickel. And I think Eryk Anders gets it done. But I think really what it'll be is Jamie Pickett will start slowing down in the second round, get beat up a bit in the first, get taken out a bit in the first, controlled in the clinch a bit in the first. He'll slow down in the second round, get clipped with a big shot from Eryk Anders, then Eryk Anders will just pour it on with volume and get a second round TKO. Moving up on the card, and this is not 100% confirmed yet. I know Dana White said it, but then there was a post by Ricky Turcios saying that, maybe he wasn't going to fight this week. But we have Raul Rosas Jr. versus Ricky Turcios, which was supposed to be on the Mexico City card, which I already broke it down, so I'm not going to spend too much time breaking it down. But it's supposedly being rescheduled at a catch weight for this card. Pick's not going to change. I'm going Raul Rosas Jr., second round sub. Ricky Turcios in his last fight against Kevin Navidad was getting taken down and controlled. Turcios has decent BJJ, so I think he'll probably get taken down in the first round, controlled a bit, be able to avoid the submission. I think in the second round, he'll be more tired, getting controlled even more by Raul Rosas Jr. I think Raul Rosas Jr. start being a little bit more aggressive because he's probably going to come into this fight worried about his cardio because his last fight, he dominated, or it's not his last fight, 2 fights ago, he dominated Christian Rodriguez in the first round, but then kind of gassed out from, the heavy pressure and volume and, trying to look for a finish. I think he's going to come out a little bit slower in this fight. Plus, he's coming off of sickness from last week. I don't even know if it's a smart decision rescheduling it for 1 week later, but I think he'll be more aggressive in the second round. I'm going Raul Rosas Jr., second round rear naked choke. And that's the beginning of the main card. That's the start of the main card. So moving up on the card, we have Umar Nurmagomedov versus Bekzat Almakhan, I think is how you pronounce it. This is crazy. I mean, we're having a guy making his UFC debut against Umar Nurmagomedov. And I watched some tape on Bekzat. He looks decent, has decent striking, decent grappling. But to make your debut against Umar Nurmagomedov, talk about drawing the short straw. He's young, he's 26 years old, he's looked decent, he's 17-1 overall. He's fighting okay competition based on their records. But I just think Umar Nurmagomedov's going to be too much for him. I think Umar, people think of Nurmagomedov, they think of him as like a heavy grappler. And he has excellent grappling, but he's primarily a striker, in my opinion, and a really good kicker. And, I think was it 2 fights ago? No, it was his last fight. KO'd Ronnie Barcelos with a left hook. Fight before that, beat Nate Maness. Fight before that, submitted Brian Kelleher. Fight before that, submitted Sergey Morozov. And, you know, he just looked really good in the UFC, found a bunch of finishes. I think Bekzat making his UFC debut. I think he's just trying to accept this fight to get into the UFC. I'm going Umar Nurmagomedov. I think he finds a finish. I think he's going to TKO Bekzat. I think he probably finishes him in the second round. I'm going to say head kick TKO. Starts with the head kick, drops him, swarms him on the ground with ground and pound, finishes him off in the second round. I just think Umar Nurmagomedov is leaps and bounds better than Bekzat at this point in their career. You know, Umar was supposed to fight Corey Sandhagen, injured his shoulder. Now he's fighting this guy just to get a fight in. So even though he's young, he only has one loss, he's fighting decent competition. Maybe this is a trap fight because everything in my mind is telling me going with Umar Nurmagomedov. I think he has the advantage everywhere. I think he can out-grapple him. I think he can outstrike him. I think he's just better literally everywhere. I think he'll be stronger. Bekzat actually doesn't even look that big for the bantamweight division as well. But, you know, when I watched some of Bekzat's tape, which I didn't see a lot of it, he looked very hittable. And that's why I think Umar's going to finish him with a KO. I don't think he's going to, or we could see Umar kind of rock him and then follow him to the ground and find a submission. But I've seen him as a bit hittable in some of his fights that I watched on YouTube and, you know, that I dug up from around. So I think Umar Nurmagomedov catches him in the second round with a head kick, swarms him on the ground with ground and pound. So I'm going Umar Nurmagomedov, second round TKO. Moving up on the card, we have Matt Schnell versus Steve Erceg. This is actually, I think this is an easy pick. I'm very, very high on Steve Erceg, to be quite honest. Steve Erceg made his UFC debut against David Dvorak, who I believe was ranked in the top 10 at the time, and went out there and beat him, clear as day. Rocked him, I think, in the second round. Great performance. And then his last fight fought Alessandro Costa and beat him by unanimous decision. Looked good in that fight as well. And Costa actually is underrated in the UFC. And meanwhile, Matt Schnell is coming off a loss against Mateus Nicolau, where he got KO'd brutally. Fight before that, beat Sumadarji, but was in an absolute all-out war. That was one of the craziest fights I've ever seen. If you haven't seen that, go back and look at it. Then the fight before that, lost to Brandon Royval, got finished there. So, you know, and then even, you know, go back 5 fights ago, split decision over Tyson Nam. So, in his last few fights, his best win is against Sumadarji, where he almost got finished so many times and took a lot of damage, and basically Sumadarji just gassed out. Meanwhile, Steve Erceg's just really good everywhere. Good grappling, good footwork, good volume, good striking. I just, you know, I can't go with Matt Schnell. Also, Matt Schnell has 4 KO losses, and I just think Erceg is just super well-rounded. He's really good everywhere. I don't really see a whole lot of holes in his game. I think he'll actually be a future contender in the division. I really do. 28 years old, Matt Schnell's 34 years old. You look at their height and reach, there's really not that much difference. They're the same height, and then you have an 1.5 inch reach advantage for Matt Schnell. I see Steve Erceg boxing him up. Honestly, I'm taking Erceg to finish him in the first round. I think Erceg's that much better. So I'm going to go Steve Erceg first round KO. I think Matt Schnell is going to try to pressure, but he's a bit shinny. And I think probably Schnell will probably try to grapple, but Erceg's really good with scrambles, really good with takedown defense. We've seen it against David Dvorak. And I just don't see Matt Schnell being able to be competitive on the feet with Steve Erceg. So I'm going Steve Erceg, late first round KO against Matt Schnell. Schnell will try to survive. He's kind of gritty, but I think he'll get put out cold. And I think Steve Erceg finishes the fight in the first round. Moving up on the card, we have Alex Perez versus Muhammad Mokaev. Believe it or not, if Muhammad Mokaev wins this fight, he could be number 1 contender in the flyweight division. Because right now, Moreno just lost. Royval's definitely not getting another shot this soon. You know, he just fought him, last month, 2 months ago at 296, I believe. Manel Kape missed weight. So who's in line right now? Muhammad Mokaev has been very vocal. He wants to fight top-ranked guys. He wants to be one of the youngest champions ever. And I think if he beats Alex Perez, he has a kind of a claim to potentially take on Pantoja. I know that sounds crazy, but I'm just wondering if Perez is going to show up for this fight. His 9 out of his last 10 fights have been canceled. I think the majority of those reasons have been because of Perez. I don't think all of them has, but he's been super inactive. I mean, his last fight was a 1.5 years ago against Alexandre Pantoja, got finished there. Fight before that got submitted by Devison Figueiredo, so a very high strength of schedule. But that title shot against Figgy was almost 3.5 years ago. That's crazy. His last win was against Jussier Formiga, who's not even in the UFC, hasn't even been in the UFC for a while. It was 3 years, 8 months ago. So how can you pick Alex Perez? I think Alex Perez is a bit underrated, to be honest. I think he has good striking. I think he has decent grappling. But to be honest, I don't know what it's going to look like. After this long layoff and constant pullouts and constant issues, Muhammad Mokaev, 10-0, undefeated, 23 years old. So he has an 8-year youth advantage, inch taller, and a 4.5 inch reach advantage. And Mokaev's improving every single fight, coming off a win in his last fight against Tim Elliott where he got a submission. He was winning the fight, but the judges' scorecards were actually going to rob him, so good thing he got the finish. Finished Jafel Fialho, where he almost got knee barred, refused to tap in that fight. Submitted Malcolm Gordon, beat Charles Johnson, hurt Cody Durden with I believe it was a flying knee, and then guillotined him right afterwards. Mokaev has this weird thing outside of the Cody Durden fight where he'll look kind of mediocre, and then he'll just pull it out of the bag and find a finish and kind of make the performance impressive. And I think he's going to do something like that in this fight. I think Alex Perez, suffering from ring rust, been out for a while, taken a lot of damage over the course of his career, been submitted multiple times. I think he has multiple losses via submission. Just to name two, in his last 2 fights, he was submitted by Pantoja and Figueiredo. He does have a very good strength of schedule. I think Muhammad Mokaev will be able to outgrapple him. I think Muhammad Mokaev has the BJJ advantage. I do think it'll be competitive in the striking, but I think Mokaev will be mixing in the grappling heavy, early, and often. I think he'll be able to get a takedown. I think Perez will make a mistake on the ground. I think he's going to end up getting submitted. I'm going to go Muhammad Mokaev. I'm going to say first round submission. I'm going to say he gets him in a guillotine. I say he takes Perez down. Perez tries to scramble back to his feet or get a reversal, ends up putting his head in a bad positioning, and I think Mokaev just latches up a guillotine, gets a statement first-round submission win, and then potentially calls for a title shot on the mic at UFC Vegas 87. Have to go Mokaev. Even if Mokaev doesn't get the submission early, I think he finds a submission some point in this fight, and even if he's not able to find a submission over Alex Perez, I think he wins pretty clearly via decision, with his grappling. I think his striking's good enough to go against Alex Perez on the feet. And I just can't trust Perez. Pulled out of 9 out of the last 10 fights. Been inactive. Been submitted multiple times throughout his career. I have to go Muhammad Mokaev. So I'm going Muhammad Mokaev, first round guillotine submission. Moving up on the card to the co-main event, we have Vitor Petrino versus Tyson Pedro. This is a good matchup in the light heavyweight division. Tyson Pedro has good power, has decent grappling, but has been kind of fighting the bottom of the barrel. He has a KO win over Anton Turcali, the pleasure man, in his last fight. Then before that, lost to Modestas Bukauskas, got outstruck there. Before that, beat Harry Hunsucker, beat Ike Villanueva. Then before that, lost to Mauricio Shogun Hua via KO, but that was 5 years ago. But that's crazy to even see that 5 years ago. Vitor Petrino, 10-0, undefeated, coming off a KO win over Modestas Bukauskas, coming off a submission win over Marcin Prachnio, decision win over Anton Turcali, and then coming off Dana White's contender series where he KO'd Rodolfo Bellato, who I believe just got a win over, his name escapes me right now, but it's the guy that taunted Shogun after a win. And he just recently fought on short notice, but I can't think of his name right now. I have to go Vitor Petrino in this fight. I think he's technical enough on the feet to avoid the power shots of Pedro. Pedro has decent grappling clinch work, but it's not like crazy good. I think Vitor Petrino ragdolls him in the grappling, can control him on the ground, and I think Petrino's better on the feet. So I think Petrino gets this one done. I mean, how can I pick against him? 10-0, 26 years old, and looked like he's getting better in every single fight. KO'd Modestas Bukauskas, clipped him badly on the feet and put him to sleep. Meanwhile, you have Tyson Pedro, who lost to Modestas Bukauskas a year ago, got outstruck, was getting hit. And also, Tyson Pedro doesn't appear to have very good stamina at all. Stamina hasn't looked good in any of his fights. So I'm going to go Vitor Petrino via KO. I'm going to go second round KO for Vitor Petrino. I see him landing some shots early, but kind of being safe. I think the first round's going to be a little bit boring. I see some clinch work from Tyson Pedro, but Petrino maybe getting like a trip off of a clinch that's initiated by Tyson Pedro. Because some controlled time from Petrino, but Pedro will be able to work his way back to his feet in the first round. But then in the second round, I think Petrino will be clipping him up on the feet. I think he'll probably find a takedown or two. Get control time because Pedro will start to be exhausted in the second round. And then I see Petrino maybe like a ground and pound TKO in the second round from like full mount. Maybe gets in full mount because Pedro's exhausted, trying to buck off, trying to get back up, scramble back to his feet, gives up his back, eventually gets into full mount. I'm going Vitor Petrino. I think he's better everywhere. I think he beats Tyson Pedro, and I think he finishes Tyson Pedro. Whether it's via submission or KO, I'm not really 100% sure, but I have to go Petrino, second round KO. Moving up on the card to the main event, Jairzinho Rozenstruik versus Shamil Gaziev. Shamil Gaziev and me have the exact same body type, so just to goes to show you what I would be able to achieve in the heavyweight division in the UFC, I have to go Shamil Gaziev. I think it's an easy win. I'm actually kind of high on Shamil Gaziev. I picked him against Martin Budai. Went out there, just walked him down and beat the shit out of him. Finished him in the second round. Was close to finishing him in the first round, if I remember correctly. Came off Dana White's contender series where he got a submission. He's 12-0, undefeated. He's primarily like a wrestler, grappler who has really heavy hands and good pressure. And then you have Jairzinho Rozenstruik, who's a really good kickboxer, has a lot of kickboxing experience, got absolutely ragdolled by Jailton Almeida in his last fight, submitted in the first round. Before that, a win over Chris Daukaus. Chris Daukaus is getting chinned by everyone at that point. Fight before that, got KO'd by Volkov. Fight before that, lost the decision to Curtis Blades where he got out-grappled. Fight before that, got a win over Augusto Sakai. I just don't see how Jairzinho Rozenstruik wins this fight. I think Shamil Gaziev is going to put pressure on him early. I think he's going to clinch with him early. I think he's going to beat him up in the clinch early with like standing elbows and shots to the body. And Gaziev fights, I don't know for sure. I really don't know for sure because he's kind of a finisher. But Gaziev fights like he knows he has a great gas tank. The way he was putting it on Martin Buday and not even scared of gassing out for the heavyweight division, that's crazy. I think he's going to come out early. I think he's going to pressure Jairzinho Rozenstruik. I think he's going to be landing some good shots on the feet. I see him clinching up, kind of working the dirty boxing a little bit, good knees to the body. And I just think Rozenstruik needs, for him to win, he likes to kind of stay at distance and have like a clean kickboxing match. That's not going to happen against a guy like Shamil Gaziev. So even in the striking, I think Gaziev has an advantage, even though Rozenstruik's the cleaner kickboxer. I think Gaziev's going to walk him down, beat him up. If he starts to get clipped up at all himself while he's pressuring, shooting on a takedown, Jairzinho Rozenstruik can't stuff a takedown to save his life. We've seen him out-grappled by Curtis Blades. I believe he was out-grappled by Volkov as well. Easily out-grappled by Jailton Almeida. And Jailton Almeida is nowhere near as big as Shamil Gaziev. And Shamil Gaziev is just a really good top position, heavy on top, good ground and pound, decent submission game. I'm going Shamil Gaziev. I'm going to say second round KO. Because if he's not getting Martin Buday out of there in the first round, even though he's close, I think probably goes to the second round against Rozenstruik. Maybe tries to conserve his energy a little bit because this is a 5-round main event, which is crazy. He's getting a main event in his second UFC fight. But I'm actually kind of high on Shamil Gaziev. For a really crappy heavyweight division, I'm kind of high on Gaziev. And I think he goes out there, rushes Jairzinho Rozenstruik, lands some shots, beats him up in the first round, maybe gets some top control time, but doesn't finish him in the first round, finishes him in the second round. Also, what's sticking in my head is the fact that you have Jailton Almeida easily finishing Rozenstruik in the first round and then having trouble with Derek Lewis. So how bad is Rozenstruik's jiu-jitsu? So Shamil Gaziev might shoot right away, honestly. But I'm going Shamil Gaziev. I'm going to say second round TKO. I think he has more power. The wrestling ability and skill level is much higher for Gaziev. I think he's going to easily take down Rozenstruik. And Rozenstruik's a big heavyweight, but so is Gaziev. So I'm going Shamil Gaziev to get it done in the second round. I think he finds a finish in this fight no matter what round it is. And it would not shock me if you get a first round KO from Gaziev on the feet. Similar to the way Francis Ngannou did, where he just bum rushes him, clips him on the feet, hurts him badly, and just brutally finishes him. So it wouldn't shock me if that happens, but I think Shamil Gaziev gets it done. I'm going second round TKO. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to like the video, and thank you so much for watching.